Okay, this is the remediation video for boot camp on simplifying radicals. So hopefully you've had a chance to first of all download this worksheet here. This worksheet here has the problems 1 through 20 of radicals to reduce. If you also notice on the right hand side are the answers, how to work through them, so maybe those are enough maybe to help you figure out the content, but if you need more help in the train of thought that you need to have to do these problems, feel free to watch the video. What we have first of all is reducing just a radical where you may have a coefficient and a radical side by side. Number one, you can't really see it so well, so I'm going to write it out in bigger numbers here so you can see it a little easier. Number one, it says 2 times the square root of 8. Now, in any of these, you're going to first of all have to know what are the square roots that you know the answer to first. If you're going to be successful in reducing radicals, you need to know some of the radicals or square roots that you know the answer to. So let's write some of them out first. Square root of 4, square root of 9, square root of 16, square root of 25, square root of 36, square root of 49, and this list goes on. I'll stop at those because that's all I can fit on the screen anyway. So 2 times the square root of 8, you want to be looking at this list, and it's better if you go from larger to smaller. If you can catch a larger one that goes into this, the less reducing you're going to have to do. If you start small, whenever you're stuck, yeah, think small first. But if you can find big ones right away that go into this inside value here, then use those before the smaller ones. So now what we want to try and do here next is try to figure out, are there any on this list here that divide into 8? Well, if you start right at the beginning here, square root of 4 goes into 8. So what we can do then is we can break that square root of 8 up into 2 radicals. Always remember that when you take a square root and you break it up into 2 separate square roots, you have to know the answer to one of the 2 of them. And it's best to always write the one you know the answer to first, because it's going to go along and connect with whatever's next to it. So I have square root of 4 times the square root of 2. These 2 multiply to give you square root of 8. Now don't forget the 2 comes along with this because all this here, the product of all this equals the original problem. Because if you take the 4 and the 2 and multiply them together, you get the 8 still, and then you're good to go. So now the next part is then, what this really says here is instead of saying 2 times the square root of 4, the next thing is evaluate what the square root is that you know the answer to, which in this case here, the square root of 4 is 2. So I really have here is 2 times 2 times the square root of 2, and what that answer then equals is these 2 numbers multiplied together, which is 4 times the square root of 2. When you get this thing broken down as far as you can go, and you can't find anything else in this list that divides into the radical inside, the value that's inside the radical, then you're as far as you can go and you've simplified the radical. Now what I'd like you to do next is try to do number 2 on your own. It says 4 times the square root of 32, and see what you can find. Again, pause the video, see if you can reduce this by the same kind of method that we used prior on number 1, and then continue the video. Okay, now we're back. Try to do 4 times the square root of 32. Again, looking at the list here, let's just say you did not catch that 16 goes into 32. It's best, again, like I said, to try to find the bigger ones first that go into 32, or the number that you're looking at, rather than the smaller ones. But let's say you didn't see that one, so I can show you what it's like to actually break it down twice. So when I take the 4 in here, I could break this 32 up into the square root of 4 and the square root of 8. The coefficient of 4 out in front, again, don't forget to bring that with. Like I said, if you break this up into 2 separate square roots, you have to know the answer to one of the 2. Okay? In this case, we know the answer to the square root of 4. So if I break that apart, I'll have 4 times 2 times the square root of 8, which then equals 8 times the square root of 8. Now, if I want to continue this problem, you have to always say before you circle your problem, your answer and say you're done, look on the list here. Do any of these here now go into your simplified answer so far? And again, you'll hopefully notice that the 4 goes into the square root of 8 and break that up again. So I have then 8, the original 8 that came with the problem, times the square root of 4 times the square root of 2. And in this case here now, the square root of 4 turns into 2, so you'll have 8 times 2 times the square root of 2. And 8 times 2 gives you 16, so you'll have 16 times the square root of 2. And there are no more numbers on this list here that go into my answers radical, therefore I'm simplified as far as I can go. The next thing you need to do then is fast forward down the list here, and you'll see something on addition and subtraction of radicals. And if you look at number 5, that's one where you see that first kind of showing up. Now, if I want to do the square root of 80, I'm sorry, if I want to try to add these together, there's something you need to be aware of first when trying to add radicals. What make it easier to remember is that if you have radicals, you have to have like terms when you're trying to put them together. If I add 3x plus 2x, that answer is going to be 5x. And you've hopefully gotten to algebra 2 by knowing that fact. If you have like terms, you add the coefficients out front. Now think of radicals the same way. If I have 3 times the square root of 7 and 2 square root of 7, then the sum of those 2 radicals, just like letters, can be combined only if the numbers inside here are the same. Since I have square root of 7 and square root of 7, therefore I can add those together. And like terms means I can add the coefficients out in front, just like you did with the letter x. And this then would be the kind of thinking that you want to think of is then 3 square root of 7s plus 2 more square root of 7s makes a total of 5 square root of 7s. Okay? Now, when I do this one right here and I start the problem out, you don't have like terms, so you cannot put these together. So we want to try to apply some of this reducing or simplifying skill that you had in the previous problems to these, and hopefully maybe ending up to get with like terms at the end. So now, if I take the square root of 80, I might catch that I have the square root of 16 and the square root of 5. If you take the square root of 16 and the square root of 5, you get 80. And maybe you didn't see that. Maybe you thought 8 and 10, but don't do 8 and 10 because there is no answer to the square root of 8 that is easy to come out and square root of 10. So don't do it that way. Only if you break them up again, like I said, you have to know the answer to one of the two square roots. Okay? You could have done 4 and 20, that would have worked, but then you have to reduce it again. So always look for what you can on the list that's big as possible that you know of that goes into the number. It'll make the problem a lot easier to do. Now if I take 3 times the square root of 16, I get 3 times 4 then, because that 16 turns into 4, times the square root of 5. And then I also have this other part here, the 20. That will break up into square root of 4 and square root of 5, with the 5 out front. And again, the square root of 4 turns into 2, so I'll have 5, oops, this is a 5 here, 5 times 2 times the square root of 5, and then addition between those. And then if I take this and write it one more time, I'll have 12 square root of 5 plus 10 square root of 5. And now I've gotten this down to, like I had before, like terms. Since the radicals are the same, now I can put them together and add the coefficients out front, and then I end up with 22 square roots of 5. Now, hopefully in the rest of the sheet now you can use the key on the side of the thing, and then that way, and to help you get along with this problem, and hopefully you have success. Good luck.